we're going to actually look at the relationship of the national government and the states, and we're going to look at how this relationship has developed over time. More specifically, we're going to look at how does it exist today. So we talked about federalism and that organization of power. So, we looked at that the federal government has powers that are dictated and the states have powers that are dictated. But also the Constitution, which is really important in a federal system, is a responsibility and obligations that the national government has to the states. The states are not completely sovereign, as in they really do need the support of the federal government to continue working and to continue going. So we see this in Article 4 of the Constitution. Remember, you have 1 that outlines the legislative branch, 2 outlines executive, and 3 outlines the judicial, and then you have 4 that outlines the relationship between the national government and the states. So some of those that are outlined, you have specifically that the only thing is whereas it's not specifically stood, we know that there must be a representative government. So we send our 9 representatives in Arizona, and we send them to Washington, D.C. And that is that they are there to represent Arizona and our interests. The thing that is big is that Washington, D.C., our federal government, cannot deny a state that representation. No state can be denied representation. And that is because they have the national government has the obligation to ensure it. They also have the obligation to ensure that all states have a government. So when we look at how a state is admitted into the union, that's an important thing. And that's one of the first steps that a state will do when they're applying for statehood. So senators from southern states, when there was the Civil War, they were not accepted like Senate until they had ratified these amendments. And that's because when the Civil War happened, these southern states really kind of gave up their state rights. So it can't happen. Invasion and insurrection. So they basically have to protect all 50 states from anything foreign, but also each other. So you have internal disorder. And that's one of the biggest things when we're looking at a lot of current events. The federal government has an important obligation to make sure that states are experiencing internal order and peace and stability. So that means that they can use federal force to resort in rare events. It really is rare that we have the National Guard sent by the president into states, because there is, of course, situations where the governor really sought after to give permission, being that when you have the president that is part of your federal government, you have the governor that is on your state level. The governor is your executive power over a state within their boundaries, and the president is the executive power of the nation. So the president can send federal forces into a state. Usually they seek governor request first, because it's like permission to enter your state. But we have several instances where that's not been the case. Detroit riots of 1967, when Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in 1968 to calm insurrection there. And then there was the race riots of 1992 in Los Angeles. So it's pretty rare occasion where when there's instability within a state that a governor can't handle with their own forces and authority, that they will, in really most occasions, request national assistance. But you have that territorial integrity. When you have state boundaries, that is important. So it's not only respecting the governor's authority within his boundaries of his state or his or her state, but it's also the federal government isn't going to make any decisions that's going to decrease the integrity of that territory. So, for instance, you have to have you have to accept who we elect. So our 9 members of the House Representatives and our 2 senators have to be accepted into the House Representatives and Senate. You have to respect that equal representation is there. That means that, yeah, we see California's got 50, I believe right now they have 52 delegates in the House of Representatives. And we see that Arizona has 9. But basically that one representative has to basically have somewhat of an equal representation of thousands of population. It doesn't always come out that way because we've capped the number of representatives at 435, but it's supposed to be. So this is an example of kind of how we have a cooperation and how the federal government fulfills its authority. So first, basically, in most occasions, the states are left to try to figure it out on their own. It's like, okay, well, this is delegated to you. This is what your responsibility is to your local people and the residents in your state. So try to figure it out. So natural disasters is one of the things. And there's a few natural disasters that have been examples of how this has kind of had to go. Step one is they really try to look at their state government. So if you have a city like Katrina, in New Orleans, you have the city of New Orleans that was supposed to see, okay, well, Louisiana, what can you do for us? And then the state has to be like, okay, well, this is what we can do. Let's see what resources we have. What do our state agencies have on guard, and what can we do? Then if the damage is so much that local, federal, and state governments can't handle it, they start declaring a major disaster, and they have to declare it as a major disaster and for a certain thing for our National Federal Emergency Administration to step in, which is the federal government. And so then the White House makes a decision to then go. The president approves because it's an executive department. And then they go in, inform the government. So if the governor is denied assistance, then that is it. If the government is granted assistance, then the FEMA sets in. So when a new state wants to be entered, so this is basically pretty important. In 1787, under the Articles of Confederation, it really is outlined how a territory became a state. And it was the Northwest Ordinance is what really set this up. And this has been followed since then. And there's been a few kind of additions that have happened since, but it's pretty much been the same path ever since we organized under the Articles of Confederation, and it stayed the same under the Constitution. You have to have at least 60,000, so you have to have a population before you can start looking at this. You then have to have follow a path, and you have to go to Congress. It's like when they pass a law, they look at your Constitution, they say, does it have anything going against the U.S. Constitution? Is it going to properly seek order in that state? Is it going to sufficiently serve the people of that population? And if so, they approve it. Once it's approved, it goes to the president like a law would. The president signs it, and they're admitted into the union. So then they have, receive their official star on our flag. So you can't take any territory from an existing state. When we look at maps of the evolving United States and how you have like the Louisiana territory that pretty much has become like 6 different states since then. Once a state is formed and the boundaries are set, you cannot take away from that state to add to any other state. And there's just some animation that doesn't really make any sense, but there you go. So the Enabling Act allows the people to specifically start this process. And then the Act of Admission is basically what goes through the process.